To order. Thank you for bringing this, by the way.
Report.
Go ahead, Mark.
Thanks, Ed. I'd like to call the select board to order.
Great, thanks everybody. Hey, Marion. Good. All right, so why don't we? That's yours. All right, so we'll pretty light agenda. We'll just go through a quick round for liaison reports. Probably we're not going to have many because we just met last week, and then we'll start going through the town budget presentations. And I know that Fidel had sent across, or Jackie or Fidel had sent across like an order as far as when we were going to do them. We may switch it up because we got more people in the room today. So just, keep your heads on a swivel. We might change up the order, and then after that, and then as many of those as we can get through, and then we'll approve minutes, and that's pretty much it. All right, so let's start with liaison reports, and I'll just kind of go around. I'm sorry, my eyesight's terrible. So it's just Andrew I can see on. Okay, so I'll start with you, Andrew, and then we'll go to the folks in the room.
No change from last week. Nothing to report.
Anything on your end, Eric?
Nothing.
Jackie?
No.
Jeffrey?
School committee met Monday,
Yep.
and they discussed the vacation academy that they had, which was particularly had helped to mitigate some pandemic learning loss. They brought some kids in. They felt that was well received, and they're looking to do again in April, and thinking about the summer. I think April they figure they can handle within their budget, but maybe this summer they might be looking for some other funding. Possibly ARPA, since there is some pandemic recovery aspect to that vacation academy.
I also sat through the school committee, so they also talked about the Killing School
Yep.
that project
Yep.
and the sort of the 7 deliverables. It's too long to discuss here all the detail, but what else?
But
And also,
probably the $2 million that they'll be looking for
Design work.
design work.
Yep.
yeah.
Something that FinCom might.
They also went over the dates, but I think that the dates will change. And they also discussed the Wood End School principal search too.
Yep.
So.
Yep. Great, thanks, guys. I forgot. Sorry, Mary, I skipped over you.
The only thing I would report, I guess, is the ARPA subcommittee had its meeting yesterday, as those of you who were there know. And we went over a presentation by the town manager on what some comparable towns were doing. We tried very hard to stick to the limited agenda, and basically we elected a chair, who's me, and a vice chair, Mark Doxer, and our next couple of meetings should be March 29th and April 12th so far, and I'm gonna go over the school committee and select board tentative calendars, and also maybe try to nail down some other things. We may be able to squeeze something in the week of town meeting, because town meeting's Monday, Thursday, and maybe we'll be able to get one more in April then. Look at the schedules.
So I will say this, after attending last night, you definitely managed to be able to kind of talk about the topics given the limited agenda. So from a chair's perspective, I think you did a fantastic job.
Well, it's kind of sudden, like they just show and like bring up the
Exactly.
agenda,
Yeah, you're it's definitely a mindset switch. When you go in, you're prepared for one thing, and then you're a chair, and you're like, yeah, that all went out the window. I got to do something different. You wear a different hat, so you did an excellent job, and anxious for the next ones. And so good lively discussion. A lot of interested parties. Everyone's kind of pointed in the right direction now.
I think it's good that we're doing this process. I belong to other Facebook pages, and there's a lot of irritation happening in Andover the way their process went down, and some towns are very inclusive and some aren't, and I'm glad we're on the inclusive side, getting community input and taking our time.
That sounds good. Well, thanks everybody. That kind of covered the two areas that I would have reported on. And do we have? so no one else is on. Okay, good. All right, so then, so now why don't we just go on to, and we can take these in any order that you want, Fidel,
Sure.
as far as, I'm
Sure,
happy
sure.
with that.
Yeah, I mean, I think that starting off with the town accountant, I think it is important because it sets the mood for the budget, particularly in terms of revenue and financial forecast and the spending scorecard. So Sharon, please take it away.
Thank you, Fidel. I'm going to share my screen if you don't mind.
Thank you.
And Sharon, is your screen, that top page is the revised page, right? That,
Yes, is the revised page.
gotcha, okay. I don't know, did everyone catch
It
that?
had a couple more errors, but
Okay.
nothing major. We'll fix them by the time they end up in the town meeting warrant, so.
Yeah,
Little typos here and there, you know how it is.
Exactly.
So I'm going to start by going over our projected revenues and then moving into the financial forecast, the spending scorecard, and then the shared cost. So for fiscal '23, our projected revenues for the town without free cash is $111.75 million of free cash, giving us an increase of 2.83 over the prior year. This chart here shows you the percentage of our total funding that we get from each source, and property taxes is 74% of our overall revenues. You see that property taxes are up by 2.6 over the prior year. That number is derived by taking the prior year levy and increasing it by 2.5% and then adding in new growth. So that's why it's more than 2.5. Local revenues are down by 1.7. State aid, we don't ever know state aid when we're doing this process for sure. And we've had an agreement for quite a while with FinCom that we would assume a 2.5%, and in November, if there's an adjustment that is needed, free cash could be used. Transfers are up 1.7, and then the free cash use is down by 4.2%. You can see our new growth numbers down here. These are the last 10 years of new growth actual numbers, and they are growing from where they were when I started. So last year was the biggest I've ever seen at $1.6 million. Our 5-year average is $971,000, the 10-year average at $865,000, and we are projecting new growth at $1,050,000 for fiscal '23. So for local revenues, I mentioned it was going down by 1.7. If you were reading through this document, you'd see some of the key elements of local revenues, which is motor vehicle excise. When the pandemic began, we revisited a lot of our revenue projections, expecting certain line items to be impacted, and motor vehicle was one of them. And we had projected it down, and we got some great new growth from it last year. But we're still not back to pre-pandemic levels. This is going up 1.3%. That's still 100,000 less than we had prior to the pandemic. So we're recovering, but not completely. We're still kind of on that growing the revenues back. Charges for services is another area, a big area of local revenues. It's at 2.1, which is level funded to the prior year. Last year, it came in under budget. We did not make this projection. And this year, we seem to be in line with budget, so conservatively, we went with a level funding for fiscal '23. Meals tax was sort of surprising. It was definitely one that we revisited and projected down from our prior forecast when the pandemic started. And it outperformed by quite a bit last year. We did have some great regeneration numbers there because of it. So for fiscal '23, we have this number going up by 15.1%, and that's 20,000 more than we had pre-pandemic. So I think a lot of people took takeout during the pandemic, and we got more than we expected. Interest earnings was another area that we decided to project down during the pandemic because we saw the interest rates falling, and we were getting record numbers prior to the pandemic, but we did not forecast it down low enough, and it came in under budget last year, and it's still projected too high, and fiscal '22 is probably still going to come in under. So it's a 47.5% decrease that we're bringing it all the way down by 190,000 because we are just not seeing the numbers we've seen in the past. So intergovernmental revenue is your state aid. We talked about that's at 2.5. And then operating transfers and available funds, what's typically there is some support from the trust funds for cemetery, sales cemetery lots, which is fairly consistent year over year. We also get the release of overlay from the assessors. They release in 1 year and then we use it in the next year. Last year we got 300,000. This year they're planning to release 325, and that's what we projected into our fiscal 23 budget. We are expecting that number to decline over the years though. The RMLD annual payment used to be linked to some sort of CPI index, but we reworked that agreement. And now it's based on kilowatt hours sold. And we conservatively just projected that number at what we got the current year because we just don't know how that's going to go. So that one's conservatively at 2.4. This slide here is a slide a lot of people like to see. This is our free cash over the last 10 years projected out for to fiscal 24. When we're doing the projections for fiscal 22, actual free cash use is utilized, and then we assume a $1.5 million regeneration. We use that same number for fiscal 23 and 24, but in fiscal 23 and 24, we're assuming $2.5 million of free cash use. You see if it happens this way that we start to see our numbers go down. We have been extraordinarily fortunate with our regeneration numbers well above 1.5 million. It's the last 10 years I've been here, but we always try and stay on the conservative side, and it's really hard to know how inflation is going to impact us and what our regeneration numbers will look like going forward.
Sharon, just a quick question for you, just backing up a little bit to the RMLD payment. So I know it's based on kilowatts sold. Do we have any historical, like, I know, kind of what you pegged it at, but was there anything historical that kind of reinforced that, or are we just, since it's a new data point, we didn't use that?
I think that we opted to go fairly conservative because during the pandemic, so many of our, especially in the Burlington area, so many of our commercial clients were remote, and so we weren't selling as much power in certain areas. So I think that we were just assuming that the pandemic may have changed things a little bit, that so many were working remote. Some are going back to work. At this point, a lot of people are back to work. I mean, I know a lot of companies that actually went the route of downsizing their office space and having people work remote. So it's hard to say how that's going to pan out for our electrical usage. And so we wanted to stay conservative until we started to see what these numbers look like, post-pandemic.
With that said, though, RMLD is coming before FinCom,
Yep.
and right now it's scheduled for the 23rd. But
Yep.
we can move it up, and I'll give them a heads up that it's coming. So I mean, the what's good on our side, I think, is that the state in general is going towards electrification,
Yes.
right? Which is going to result in more power being sold, right?
Yep.
So if it's tagged to the amount of power that is being sold, it's a good thing long term.
Yeah, yep.
I think I misspoke. It was Bloomington that they definitely cited in one of my quarterly meetings that they were seeing some reductions in their commercial clients in Bloomington. So it's an interesting line item that we don't have enough history since it's been changed to actually really feel comfortable upping that number much. So I left it alone. As we get more history, it'll be easier to project.
Sure, Jeffrey, go ahead.
Sharon, can you speak a little bit about the historical rate for the state aid? How often have we had to ask for more free cash because it didn't come in that budget?
So typically it does come in much lower than the 2.5%, but Bob tended to use some of the added new growth and not ask for any free cash. So we haven't been asking for free cash in November in many, many years, but it's out there as a tool for us if we should need it. But what usually happens is we're pretty conservative on our projection for new growth because we just don't know what's going to be ready to be built for real estate with some of these developments. And then when November comes around, we've got a certified number from DOR for our new growth, and that's when we take the additional piece. So I think typically Bob has used some of that to balance it. balance it back and not have to ask for free cash. But we don't normally see 2.5. It's very optimistic, but I think it's just because we just never know it, and it's just an easy number to plug in, 2.5%. That's what our taxes can go up. So that was the number we all agreed on.
Thank you.
Okay. This is the financial forecast. This is where revenues and accommodated costs are combined. And as you know, what we do here in Reading is we project, when we start off our budget process, we project our revenues first and then our accommodated cost. And then once we get through that, we figure out the difference. So the accommodated cost comes right off the top, and what remains is what we split between the school and the town. So here you'll see the categories of accommodated costs: benefits, capital, debt excluded, energy, financial, education, which is fed out of district, special ed, vocational schools, miscellaneous, and community priorities. Here in fiscal 22, you see $150,000 there. That was the $70,000 for the social justice position, then the $80,000 that was added at town meeting for the clinician within the public safety. We don't show anything here in this year. So one thing to note is up here when you're looking at free cash, there's through fiscal 24, FinCom gave us the direction to try to utilize, go above the 5% for debt and capital, which is what we generally do, and go to 5.5%, and that they would fund that additional 0.5% out of free cash. So that's why you see that broken down. That will go away after fiscal 2024, and we will be back to a 5% debt and capital number.
Karen, can I ask to clarify for the miscellaneous line J? Was that what you were referring to with the equity and mental health, or no? That's what
Okay, the community priorities. So when there is something that comes up that town and school consider to be a priority, we discuss it, the town manager, me, the finance director at the school, and the superintendent, and we decide whether or not it's a community priority based on the feedback that we've gotten from our boards, and we will agree to put it into the community priorities line so that it's taken off the top before we split the numbers. And so that was last year. The 150 was 70,000 for the social justice and 80,000 for the mental health clinician.
Yes. So my question then is, what kinds of items are in?
Miscellaneous.
I will show you. I'm good. I was just about to
Okay.
there.
Okay, sorry.
So I just kind of gave you the broad categories going up, but I wanted to show you exactly what makes it up. It's only going up by 2.56%. If I go down further, you can see the breakdown. 36.5% is given to the town, and 63.5% of what remains after accommodated cost goes to the school department. This gives us the breakout of the different revenue types and the accommodated costs. So let me go further down. So under benefits, these are the line items that make up accommodated costs for benefits. You can see that benefits are going up 5.1%. The key drivers here are the pension at 6.5%. The Reading Retirement Board votes a funding schedule every 2 years, and that's based on an actuarial report. And because we had to make a lot of, I'm on the retirement board, because we had to make a lot of assumption changes, one being PARAG asking us to bring our discount rate all the way down to 7, it was going to push out our years to be fully funded from 2029 to deeper into the future if we didn't accept this 6.5%. So it ended up being pushing out our fully funded status to 2031, even with the 6.5%, because the modifications to the assumptions were increased the liability by like $10 million. So that is one of the key drivers there is the pension. Also, you'll notice that OPEB contribution during the pandemic, we brought that all the way down to $100,000. And we're restoring that in fiscal 23 to normal levels around 500,000. And that's a 400% increase. Another thing to be noting there is that OPEB contribution, we don't usually make that contribution until April, and that line can be used as a buffer if health insurance comes in over budget. a lot of times when we're building this budget, we have no idea what enrollment is gonna look like for the year. We might not even have a definitive on what our increase is gonna be year over year. But you will see that health insurance is only going up 1.7%, which is just remarkable. Like, it's just amazing to me that we can see just such small numbers there. Over the last 10 years, that increase in health insurance has been lower than our increase in revenue for the last decade. So that's like hats off to the PEC and Bob, because that's remarkable. I know our actuary's always like, are you sure? When I send her this information, like, how do you guys keep these numbers down? I know a few years back, Bob and the PEC worked really hard to get a lot of retirees that were over 65 that for whatever reason were not on Medicare. They were on our regular plan, our Blue Cross Blue Shield plan, which was much more expensive. We worked really hard with those folks and got them on Medicare, and then they were on our MedX supplemental plan, which was much more cost efficient. And it brought down our average age of our membership in our Blue Cross Blue Shield and saved us a lot of money. So there's been a lot of work done with the PEC to try and find ways to keep that number from going up the double digits that so many others see. So those are the big drivers there, the pension, the OPEB, and then obviously health insurance is not going up a big number, but it's the biggest number we see there. Capital, you see that the capital is going down because capital and debt are treated together. 5% of the total budget is capital and debt. How we get there is we determine what our principal and interest payments are for the upcoming year, and then whatever's left of that 5% is what we do for capital. So it's kind of almost like a flip. This one's going down and this one's going up. The debt service payments are going up. So in fiscal, actually November 2021, we issued $12.2 million of debt at less than 1%. I think it was 0.89 or 0.87%, like remarkably low. Every time we issue debt, I can't believe how low we get our interest rate. Shortly after we issued the debt, the rates started to climb, so we picked our moment very well. So it really was a good choice of FinCom to allow us to take on more capital and use some debt to do that, because we really did get great rates, very favorable rates. And then energy, up 1.5%. So in energy, you see that there's street lighting, electricity, natural gas, water, sewer, and fuel for the vehicles. Nothing much to say there, pretty basic numbers. And then under financial, that's our casualty insurance, veterans assistance, and then the FinCom reserves, down 0.5%. That's largely driven by declining numbers in our veterans assistance. Over the last several years, we've seen that number decline more and more, and it's assumed that it has to do with veterans moving out of Reading or passing away. So we have fewer and fewer, and so that number is down by 16.7%. The audit district special 2.5%, that number is coming from the school department. They project it for us, and so that's where that is. I can't really speak to how they get to it, but that's what that is. And then the vocational schools is up 6.6%. This is a difficult one for sure. The first vocational school listed there in Wakefield, our rates are based on enrollment from the prior year. So you would think that one would be easy, but for some reason we struggled to get an official number. And then the Minuteman in Essex North, it's on the current year enrollment, and they don't have to finalize that number till late in the fall. So we struggle to get an enrollment number. So you'll see sometimes that these numbers get adjusted at future town meetings, because we're making a guess based on the last we knew, basically. So you will see sometimes that we'll make adjustments later.
Sharon?
And yes?
Oh, can I just confirm, is the big bump up in FY25 for the Northeast, that's when we start paying off the new construction?
Yes, so from what I understand, the reading through Bob's notes is that that did in fact pass, and we should be seeing on top of our regular enrollment, our tuition for our students is a capital charge of $250,000 each year for 30 years. So that's being incorporated here.
Okay.
Good catch. I didn't mention it. I should have. I apologize. So under miscellaneous, Jackie, this is what's made up in there. We have rubbish, snow and ice, state assessments. State assessments are not voted by a town meeting, but we have to put them somewhere so we know that we have enough revenue to cover them. They come out and they're deducted from our state aid. Snow and ice is usually fairly level funded because it's the one line item that you cannot reduce from year to year. So we kind of conservatively estimate it, and then we fund it at an April town meeting if it goes over. And that way there we don't have the opportunity cost of cutting things from the budget that we could have had. In some years we stay under the 675, most years we need a little bump. So, but that's the way it's been done for the last 10 years that I've been here, because you can't reduce it. If I put 675 one year, I can't put 600,000 the next year. And it's the only line that you can legally have a deficit and raise it on the recap, which we never raise it, but we fund it at a future town meeting with free cash or funds bill and other areas. So that's at 1.8%. This is your spending scorecard, which is essentially the summary of all the budget that you're going to be asked to vote on March 23rd, each line item and how you're... I'm sorry?
No.
No?
Go ahead, Sharon. Sorry.
I thought somebody had a question, I apologize. So this is what the line items you'll be asked to vote on March 23rd when we wrap up our presentations. And the numbers you're seeing right now are the town manager's numbers, and you have the right to make adjustments to them if you see so fit. But if you do adjust up or down, you need to identify the funding source. Obviously, a lot of times you've seen it adjusted by FinCom. They've asked to add something that we had to cut. Well, that would mean you'd have to give us the free cash or some other funding source to do it. But whatever the town manager budget is, if you guys agree with it and you vote it, this is what will go to town meeting, and these are the lines that will be voted for the budget. So you see that total shared cost up 4.8%, total government up 3.2%. You'll notice within the town, most of the town departments are voted salary and expense. So the way that works is that it's voted that way. You cannot commingle the two. So if I had extra money in administrative service salaries, I can't use it as an expense unless I ask town meeting to move it between the lines. So the way it's voted is the way it has to be used. But you will note that some areas are bottom lines. So snow and ice, salaries and wages are all, salary and wages and expenses are all one. Street lights, rubbish, and facilities, both the facilities, the core and the town building, all bottom line. The one thing to note though with facilities is their capital is up here, so capital is not bottom line for them, but all of their salary expense is bottom line. The school department is, and has to be bottom line, and they're going up 4.2%. Overall voted general fund budget at 113,586, 338. The state assessments will not be voted by town meeting, but we always show it. Down below, you see the water enterprise fund, sewer enterprise, storm, and PEG. This typo is being fixed, and we're adding the landfill. So the landfill has been in existence. That enterprise fund has been in existence since December 2002. It was created so that it could be used for the post-closure cost and monitoring. The developer that purchased that property on Walker's Brook has a contract, that's a 30-year contract the EAP required of us to make sure that the post-closure monitoring and maintenance got done. So every January they send us $37,000, and then throughout the year they send us proof that they actually did the monitoring, so they're paid bills, and then I will refund them out of the deposit they gave me. They are required to pay $40,000 every year for the post-closure monitoring, and that's escalated up by 3% every year. So whatever they don't spend gets rolled to the next year. So in the beginning of this arrangement, the town did have liability related to this, but we haven't had to pay anything, because anything that goes over that $40,000 plus the 3% escalation is the town's responsibility. We haven't had a liability related to the landfill since 2011 because the escalation has made their portion grow by so much. But recently DOR asked that we start to vote it because it was voted as an enterprise fund and we are dispersing cash. So from here on out, you'll see this $37,000 come in as a line item for our enterprise fund, but essentially it's a performance deposit. It's a deposit being paid by the developer, and it's the town's requirement to make sure that they're doing the maintenance and monitoring of that landfill. So that's a new line item, which will probably be greatly discussed. Bob provided this interesting slide here, so I'll explain what it shows. This fiscal 23 is how our funds are used in fiscal 23 as compared to fiscal 18. So what you'll notice is when you compare these two charts is that the school department and public safety and the public library are the only ones where their percentage actually goes up. All the other areas, we decrease the percentage of how much of our overall budget is used. So for instance, if we look at this, the school department is at 46.3%. In 18, it was 45.3%, so it's increased. Public safety is at 11.8, and public safety was at 10.9 back in fiscal 18. And then the library, very small, 1.8 compared to 1.7. All other areas, so capital and debt, 7.6, 7.9. All other areas are going down. Town hall, 5.5, 5.7. So it's just showing that we're trying to allocate more funds in the areas that people think are the highest priority. This is the shared cost, which kind of are all the costs. They're actually accommodated costs, but they're the accommodated costs that are across both town and school. So they're the benefits, capital and debt, income reserves, and the vocational schools, up 4.8%. And as we discussed earlier, the detail related to that is shown, and it gives you a little bit more information rather than just seeing it in chart form about why numbers are going up and the way that they are. So if you were to look at retirement and saw 13.3, you're like, what? Down here, it shows you a little bit more. Retirement is made up out of the assessment, the OPEB contribution, and the actuarial cost to do our valuations. So it gives you a little bit more information to go on. Not a lot going on in any other area, really. Benefits is here. We talked about that earlier. Capital and debt. In this area, we've already kind of talked about, but Bob gives us quite a bit of guidance to help us kind of have a path forward and know exactly what's going on. So for this year's budget, it's 2.68, but when we go down here, he gives us a lot of information about related to capital inside the levy and how much debt we've used and debt and capital within the levy. So what's been approved, what's capital, and what is planned in future fiscal years.
Sharon, can we interrupt just a sec? There's a 5% or 5.5% target for capital and debt, but on the pie charts, we're seeing 7.6%. Can you explain the?
So when we build our budgets, we tend to have the 5%, but in later town meetings, we do, as we see extra money like that's been saved from benefits, we do capital as it comes up. So sometimes that number can end up being higher based on doing that. So that would be why, because but it seems like, it does seem a little strange to me. It seems like a lot, but we do change April and November. If there's extra money to spend, I know that when we do get our new growth numbers, sometimes like last year, our new growth number came in so much higher that, and we had made the error of trying to use free cash, and we know we have to use it or we lose that new growth. So we have to, make changes and use that money. So sometimes that one-time money that we see goes towards capital.
I mean, that's like $2 million, right? That from 5.5% to 7.6%.
You go back here.
Right there, yes.
Yeah, it does seem a little bit strange. I did not create the chart, so I can look at the back and then get back to you on it.
Okay. Is that
But I do know that 5.5% is what we're
Could be, you're right, like
Is that possibly the amount outside the debt, outside the levy for the library and high school? Is that counted in that 7.6%?
Oh, I'm sorry, you're right. It's absolutely, the excluded debt is in there. When we're doing our debt, capital and debt, inside the levy is the 5.5%. So that would make up for it because our excluded debt is about over 2 million, and I'll show you that on a later slide. So that's the difference, that's the nexus there. So it's capital and debt, and that would be inside the levy debt and excluded debt. When we're doing our 5.5% for debt and capital, it is not including the excluded debt that's out there. So that would make sense. I was going to show you the excluded debt, 'cause it's kind of good information that Bob provides in this section. So he shows that we're going to be using 2.68 million dollars of capital in the fiscal 23 budget, and then we have this 5.98 million for debt, and that would include the excluded debt. The charts below, he also gives us kind of some timeline here of when we're going to have projects and capital things that need to be considered at different town meetings. So he kind of gave us a roadmap that I can go over if you like, but in June of 2023, he's assuming that there's potential for us to potentially need to borrow for these particular projects, and if we wanted to do that, that we would ask in November town meeting. He gives us what he thinks might be in the pipeline for 2024, as you can see here, and when we should ask for that debt authorization. And so he gives us a kind of a great little roadmap as to, so that, because a lot of this stuff he worked on exclusively, and we're all kind of trying to learn it. And so this is a great roadmap that Bob provided. Down below, the chart I wanted to show you about excluded and regular debt is down here. Here. So this is inside the levy. So these are all the debts that we have right now currently inside the levy, and he shows you what the debt service looks like. And then he shows you with these projects he's talking about where they would land. And then below, he shows you the excluded. So right now, all we have for excluded debt is the high school, Barrows and Wood End, and the library. And what you'll notice when you look at this is that at fiscal 24 is the last payment for the high school, Barrows and Wood End, and the library is paid off in fiscal 25, and it's really well planned for us to take on something for Killam. Because these debt exclusions, because they are debt exclusions, they increase the residents' tax bill while the debt is outstanding. So they would be falling off, and if you're asking for more excluded debt, it will hurt less for the taxpayer when that comes, if they choose to go the direction of doing Killam, which I would hope they would. So it's planned pretty well for us, because you see these things falling off. When I started back in 2012, the high school, Barrows, Wood End, all that stuff was refunded, and we saved a lot of money. And I think he may have even brought, can't recall, but I think he may have brought back, made it so that we paid it off earlier than originally issued. So it really is a good time for Killam to come along and be approved by the MSBA, because I think this will work out favorably on our timeline. FinCom reserves are unchanged. We talked about the regional schools and about how it's difficult. You might see these numbers being adjusted at future term meetings, because it is challenging based on their timelines to get actual enrollment numbers to know what we need to budget here. But we will be seeing on that first one, Northeast Regional, in the future, that build for their new schools start to increase our numbers by 250,000. And that is all I have, unless people have questions.
Any questions from anybody on the committee? Sharon, thanks so much for this. Thanks for going through it. Really appreciate it. A lot of good information in here. Yeah, no questions from my end. Anybody on Zoom have any questions?
Not on my end. Thanks, Andrew.
Thanks, Andrew.
Would you mind, Ed, if we go with the folks who are in the room first, and then kind of
We can do
bounce
whatever.
around?
Yeah, that's totally fine.
Excellent, thank you. So the first one would be the library. So Jackie, if you could go to page 66 in the booklet, that would be great. Sorry, Gene. I'm sorry, Matt. Thank you. Thanks, Jackie.
Yeah, so, I'm not sure how many of you were at the December meeting at the library. Salaries have gone down a bit, but otherwise not much has changed. Overall, we're asking for a 3.3% increase. It's a budget that the trustees approved, the revised salaries. They updated at their February meeting. The primary drivers are the salaries and the basically the 3.75% expected increase, which is for all our non-union employees. Rebuilding some of the expenses that have been reduced over the 5 years, and then everything we need to maintain our state certification. I'm not going to go through the whole thing, but we have several divisions. We have administration, which is where all of our expenses are housed, as well as some of our support staff substitutes, and some senior staff. And then we have the new division of equity and social justice, which is one staff member, collection services, salaries, and vote services salaries. So it's pretty basic. Do you have any questions? I really don't have anything to add in the summary. Does anyone have any questions about the narrative? I'm happy to answer any questions.
Amy, I had one. Just kind of going through, and I was looking through, and you kind of have a document in here that different types of kind of sources of funding and so forth that kind of come through. Just a quick question, and I think I already know the answer, but I figured I'd answer it anyways. Does the library earn anything if folks reserve space within the library? Is there fees associated with that?
Yes, that's a different one. Actually, that goes into a different fund. That doesn't come back to the library. That goes into a revolving fund. Sharon or Joe might know where that goes. The room rental fees, that goes to a revolving fund. That's not our money.
It goes to a revolving fund, yes.
Yeah, but it's not the library's revolving fund. It's something that's specifically meant for facilities.
Gotcha.
rentals.
Okay.
This is Ann Landry. I'd like to call the select board to order if they haven't already been called to order.
Too late.
Thank you.
Thanks, Dan.
Any other questions for the library budget? All right.
Nothing on my end.
Thanks, Amy.
Thanks, Amy.
Mr. Joe, you're up. All right. So Jackie, page 71, if you don't mind.
Okay, thank you for having me. So this year, this requested budget, we're asking for a 3.3% increase. If you go to this first slide right here, you'll see the expenses are up 3.3%, and the wages for the core facilities department and the town facilities. There's two separate divisions. Core facilities is made up of the maintenance and upkeep of all the buildings, town and school, and town buildings is comprised of mostly custodial staff and cleaning contracts, which we'll go through on the next slide. Okay, Jeff. So like I said, the wages are up. The wages are mostly driven by step and COLA increases as well as union negotiations. There is no proposed staffing changes in the core facilities or the town facilities budgets at all. It's the same level as last year. You are going to see a significant increase in the HVAC expenses. Over the past few years, we've gone to a MERV 13 filter at all town and school buildings, which is more expensive and requires more frequent changes. We're doing that over 4 times a year now, rather than 3 times a year, and the filter cost has gone up substantially.
That's your core HVAC
Correct.
expenses sketch. Okay.
Yep. All the contracts you see, the facilities department is made up of the core facilities. We have 4 craftsmen, an electrician, a plumber, and 2 carpenters. And the remainder of the work that is done by facility is outsourced. So when you see these expenses, these electrical, elevator, these are all procured through under Chapter 149, so these are all service contracts that we have, and we bid those out every 3 years. So those increases are accurate increases in what we're seeing.
Are they staggered, those contracts, or do they all come due at the same?
I would love to have them all come due, in June, but we probably have like 30 that we'd be giving to Allison Jenkins. I don't think she'd be too happy with me, but we do try to be, proactive, and when we can, you're gonna see on one of the next slides, the contract cleaning for the town facilities. We actually got pricing, which will start in October, so we have good numbers. So we wanted to get that so we knew what the budget was gonna look like.
Gotcha.
So we do try to be proactive with that.
Sure. Quick question.
Sure.
We'll go back to that. The core energy expense is up
Yep.
versus, FY '21. What's the jump on those?
So it's the energy expenses, there's two drivers to that. One of the drivers is building use. Number one, you got, during COVID, the buildings were mostly, especially the schools, were, I think for a 3-month period, pretty much shut down, and we weren't doing any facilities rentals, and we really didn't get into that fully until last year. So that's one reason. So it's consumption, and it's usage based on, like, the schools are in full swing at night, right? During the school year and on the weekends. We did negotiate a 3-year contract for natural gas. The town manager actually signed the contract in June for 3 years. We have a really good rate, so we were at $4 and I wrote it down here. We were at $4.95 a decatherm, and the 3-year rate we got for is now $4.62 per decatherm. And with what's going on in the energy markets right now, that's good news for Reading.
Yeah.
Okay. And we do employ energy management. We're heavy in energy management. Our assistant director, who's also he's zoomed in on the call, is the person that's really daily going in there and watching what the trends are in the buildings. And we also our admin also monitors consumption, so that we have real-time numbers all the time, so we see if we're tracking ahead or behind. So
How's this year looking versus the budget?
good. Yeah, we're in good shape right now. We've had a lot of materials have gone up really through the roof especially mechanical equipment. And the buildings are getting older. Everybody seems, they think, oh, the high school's brand new, and it looks great, and Wood End looks great, and Barrows looks great, but the fact is, these buildings are 15 years old. So we are seeing stuff, some mechanical equipment, coming to the end, and I'm not talking necessarily large pieces of equipment, but some of the rooftop equipment, it gets tired, and then the material cost has gone through the roof. So. But we manage it very well, and we try to be proactive with our preventive maintenance program. Yes?
Well, I had a question on the energy thing on the next page. Were you gonna say something
No.
about, because I scrolled ahead in the budget, so if, Jack, you can go to the next. I'm just curious why, I was looking when you're counting school buildings, rates of increase. So why is the water sewer for the school rate of increase double that of the town? This isn't like a COVID, remote school to being in school. It said 22 to 23 change, so just 7.2% for the schools versus 3.8% for the town jumped out at me.
The rates we did get rate increases on water and sewer, but again, it's also driven by usage. It's not just flushing the toilets and the showers and domestic water, but it's also irrigation systems, which on the school side, the schools make up, out of the 1,100,000 square feet, they make up almost 85% of the square footage. So by an order of magnitude, the schools just are a bigger consumer of utilities. I don't know if that answers your question.
Yeah, no, I guess I just was assuming that, okay, it's a bigger consumer, but it would have the same rate of increase. So that was just, like for example, under natural gas, the school rate of increase is, I'm a little more than a third of the rate of increase. I was looking at the percentages, not the raw amounts for natural gas, so I just didn't understand. I figured, okay, if there's more school buildings and more of it using more water and sewer and getting a higher rate increase, wouldn't that apply with the natural gas too? But maybe I'm just not understanding it. It's not a big deal, I just was stuck,
Yeah,
jumped out.
we can see how that number is made up, the 167.5, and I give you like
Yeah,
a
I mean,
breakdown of
it
that
probably
useful.
might be something someone might ask about at
Sure.
town meeting. I'm
That's fine.
just,
We can do that.
I think that's, and then down below there, we just gonna, and I won't bore you with all the details, but some of the initiatives that we're doing right now, everybody was speaking of energy. We did the LED pilot project with Noresco at the Reading Memorial High School. Right now, we're in phase 2 of the performance contracting initiative. They've mobilized already, and they're gonna be completing and actually starting the remaining LED conversion for all the town and school buildings except for Killam. And that'll be the first energy conservation measure they do. That project is gonna go on for about 14 months.
So I had a question on that one. So how soon do you start to see any efficiencies from like that phase 2? Like, and can you use like phase 1 as a benchmark? Like,
Yeah, we can get
how
you
tangible is it?
Well, when we did the lighting conversion, I could get the numbers for you, but when we replaced, I wanna say around 75% of the fixtures in the high school right now are LED. We're gonna finish it when we do the remainder of the big project. But those savings you see almost immediately once they're installed in the buildings. And no, that's like that's really what drives the performance contracting project.
Yeah.
For the overall savings. There are other measures we're gonna do in the buildings, condensing boilers.
Yeah.
We're gonna have our energy management systems refined a little bit to give us better control for rentals at night in schools. Whereas right now, we would maybe have to occupy a whole classroom wing if there was like one event going on in one particular room. We're gonna have more zone control.
Cool.
And for Kevin's purposes, when they rent a space out, we can actually go right into that one room. So we're not running like a whole wing of classrooms, for instance.
That's nice.
So it's pretty exciting.
That's good stuff.
Are the costs like locked in with that contract? Like you mentioned, like with inflation, everything's going up, right? So.
Yeah, it's a $5 million debt authorization, and the project cannot go over $5 million. There have been increases. We did have an increase in some of the lighting components. We met with them today, but they figured out an alternative fixture that we can use, which is going to save us a little bit of money. If there are other increases in some mechanical equipment, like I mentioned to you, we do have a plan where we could de-scope a little bit, but not hurt the overall savings in the project, which is good news.
Got it. So you just you got that bar of $5 million. Right?
Exactly, that's
Okay.
the number.
Good. Okay.
That's the number, yeah. And I think that's it, unless you have any other questions.
I just had one, you had the slides here on the capital projects and the ones that are coming up. Those are yours too, right, Joe?
Yep.
So I know Park and Roof is now on hold until next summer.
Yeah, so we were consulting with our design team, and, they advised us that we should probably push it out here because of the availability of a lot of the key components. The plan is to put that out on the street because the design is completely done, it's ready to go, obviously.
Yep.
Next January for that project right there. We're gonna be doing a kickoff meeting for the police station expansion / community room space on the 17th, I believe it is, and we're gonna get rolling on that project very shortly.
Nice.
And the turf 1, we did receive bids today, and was it yesterday? I think it was yesterday. And the low bidder came in within the overall budget, and right now we're working with, the town manager and the school finance director on the scope
Thanks.
before we sign the contract, so.
So the question I had was on, so for like Parker Roof, and this gets into probably a little bit of the weeds, but so since that's now on hold,
Yeah.
does that end up freeing up, like you to do, or do you have to do more stuff to Parker because you're putting it off a year? You know what I mean? Or does that then, from time management or whatever, like okay, what you normally would have been spending this summer for Parker?
Yeah, that's a good question, and I've been asked that before, and the answer is, the roof at the Parker Middle School is not in horrible condition, okay? It's at the end of its useful life, and we do have areas that we are going to on a more frequent basis to keep the building, weather tight, building envelope sealed. But it's not gonna kill us to wait another year if we have to.
Perfect.
We have a roofing contractor, an on-call service contract that, these are flat roofs. These guys are out here quite a bit, and we're constantly maintaining them because that's the one area that you cannot neglect.
Yeah.
So,
Perfect. Thanks, Joe.
thank you.
Any other questions for Joe? Anybody on the Zoom questions?
Hey, Joe, I had a question. I saw this show up on the facilities report for the school department thing. There was something about $163,000 for arc flash testing. Does that ring a bell?
Yeah, that's arc flash testing, that's capital. That's gonna be a capital project.
But that's not on this list of...
Yeah, it's not on the, I wanna say that's 2000, that's
24, 25.
Yeah, 24, 25 for that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's basically in a privately owned building, every electrical cabinet has to be rated for safety purposes. And it depends on the arc. You know what I'm talking about.
I mean, I understand that it's a good thing to test. My question was sort of, one, why didn't we see it here? But also, is that really a capital expense? When I'm thinking, you buy things that, depreciate over a certain time. It seemed like...
Well, the capital plan is anything over, it's $10,000. Anything over $10,000 classified as capital. Once we do the arc flash testing, it's gonna produce a report. And then after the report is produced, there could be a repair list that would result in that we would have to address either through operating or maybe ask for some money. I'm hoping we can do it with operating money. The buildings are in good shape, but we are required, it's a requirement to do arc flash study.
I agree that it's a good thing to do. Yeah,
Yep,
my question just
absolutely.
was, is it a capital expense when I'm thinking like... Okay.
Yeah, I mean,
I guess you're saying we're not building something that's not bricks and mortar.
Yeah, we're not buying a bunch
It's not
of
an asset,
computers that,
right.
it's
Yeah.
not an asset, right?
Yeah.
Well, usually there's a cost and a useful life for capital, so maybe that's a share.
And a cost,
question,
and, yeah,
so-
exactly. And I mean, we capital design them, right? I mean, because it is part of that asset eventually, right? I mean, like this will get us value, right? Like it'll make the building safe. We can use it for insurance purposes, right? So I do understand what you're saying, though. It's not an asset.
And we do a similar thing now.
It doesn't have wheels.
Yeah, we do a similar thing with design money too. We'll put design money in one year, get the design done, and then the capital will come the next year. That way we're ready to hit the ground running with the project.
Yeah.
So it's kind of,
Yeah. It's more of a study, I guess. I understand what you're saying, though.
Would you consider it to be like a maintenance cost of capital? Because you're testing something that you purchased at one point that has value, or is that another way to look at it?
I mean, if we were doing a testing of one panel, right, I would get it. But this is a kind of like a district-wide assessment, right? I mean, so it makes it bigger than like just doing maintenance on one thing, and therefore it should be incorporated into the operating budget, right? I mean, it's more of a I guess a district-wide initiative. Yeah. But I mean, I do see your point that I'm sure Sharon can verify whether it meets accounting principles. I think it does, but yeah.
Excuse me, Ed?
Yep.
Sharon and Andrew both have their hands raised.
Thank you. Thanks, Jackie.
We'll go with Sharon. So we're just talking about accounting rules.
So I wasn't quite hearing what was the testing for?
So it is for rating the electrical panels in our buildings for arc flash.
So it is considered capital. It doesn't necessarily mean that I would depreciate it. It's based on the value, what kind of thing it is, and that would be like a potential building improvement. I mean, if you're testing it, you might find that you need to upgrade something in the building, and it would be under building improvements. But if it doesn't meet the threshold, which is kind of high for building improvements, it might fall under capital, under our budgeting, but it wouldn't necessarily be something I would appreciate unless we actually had a project related to that testing. So let's say the testing showed that something needed to be replaced or upgraded, I could add the cost to that as part of the project. But we do label things that are capital, that are higher dollar value, but they don't always end up being an asset that we depreciate.
Thank you.
Good, Andrew.
Good question.
Thanks, Ed. Essentially, I was going to say the same thing that Sharon said. Arc flash studies and short circuit studies are always considered part of building improvement because over the years, as you change outlets and change fixtures in buildings, that changes your rating for both arc flash and the short circuit study. Excuse me. So that would be part of capital more so than a maintenance plan. Because usually they're one-offs, you don't do those every year either. So, thank you.
Thanks, Andrew. Cool. Any more questions for Joe? Preferably not about electrical.
Okay.
Thanks.
Do you mind?
Thanks, Jay.
Page 57, please, Jackie. Thank you.
Okay, Department of Public Works, the budget changed 2.7%. That's primarily wages, new contract, and then there's been a few slight increases in the expenses. I can go through them by divisions. The administration, it looks a little odd because it went down 7.6%, but we pulled out trails and town forest out of that, and that went to the select board, so that's the decrease there. Engineering went up by 3.8%. That's just police details for some of the projects they're doing. Highway and equipment maintenance, the line items went up slightly for line painting, supplies, gravel crushing, slight increases in those type of expenses, no change in highway stormwater. You'll see the difference between forestry and parks and cemetery look really way off, and that's because this past year, it used to be Parks and Forestry Division, and looking at it, it seemed like Parks and Cemetery do very similar functions, and they were cross-training those people. Whether it's weed whacking, mowing lawns, that type of stuff, trash pickup. The only difference with the cemetery is the digging graves, but primarily everything else they're doing very similar tasks as the park. So I merged those two divisions and pulled out forestry. So it just looks different, but there's no real increases there. It's just a shift in operations.
Yep.
Let's see, snow and ice, no increase. Sharon mentioned we don't generally do that. We are going to be deficit spending as we look outside today. Traffic and street lighting, rubbish, slight increase in rubbish. We have a contract with Covanta that's goes up a couple % every year, and so does JRM. But that's a 10-year contract with JRM that started in 2016. But it's a really good contract because we don't own the recycling product, they do. So we don't get any credit for it, but a lot of communities are actually paying a lot higher because they decided to own it.
Sure,
Or,
but-
maybe
yeah.
if anybody has questions on this before I go up to enterprise.
Any questions for Jane? Anybody on the Zoom questions for Jane before she goes into enterprise?
All set?
All set.
Green light, Jane.
All right,
Yeah. Page 76, Jackie. Thank you.
the only real increase in our water fund, I mean, outside of our capital, which we have a lot of capital going on, is that we decided, because we have, so there's 60 employees, I was down about 12, and now I'm down 7, but they were in key areas in water and sewer. So, you know, I felt like any major water main break, we were not gonna be able to handle it with our people, we just didn't have the right mix anymore. I did bring back a couple people, stole them back from a couple area communities. And so that worked out well, but we did add $100,000 into the water operating in case we had water main breaks and we had to outsource. So it was sort of a little bit of a buffer. And, you know, there's a little bit of an increase in professional development because one of the folks that I have in the books, we're gonna try to get a distribution license. He already started doing that, so that's a few $1,000s. Other than that, there's not a lot of to say about the operating budget. Capital is probably painful. Sewer budget, let's see.
Page 81, Jackie. Thank you.
Yeah, again, no real difference with that. I mean, MWRA went up 3.5%, same as in water, but, yeah, there was nothing different. We didn't add anything, it's not anything different that we're doing. In the stormwater, I think was level funded, yeah. So no changes there. I mean, you know, some salary expense under that. And that's it.
Any questions for Jane? I know we've already gone over a lot of the capital stuff for water and so far. I know it's been covered in select board meetings, and I think we touched on a little bit in here at some point too. But any questions for Jane? Jackie, anybody with their hands up on Zoom?
Something on Zoom.
Perfect.
Jen, I have a quick question.
Sure, Jack, go ahead, Carl. Absolutely.
How many rubbish contractors are there to choose from? I don't know a lot.
Oh, less.
Less.
Oh, yeah, less.
A lot
Yeah.
when Billy up with the recycling. Kevin Douglas, who lives here in Reading, went Billy up there in Russell disposal, and they did. It was a hard time.
2026 expires, at what point do you start trying to renegotiate? A year, 6 months in advance?
Usually a year,
A year?
yeah.
Are there any clauses in there, the current contract for energy increase, you know, on their end, you know, fuel surcharges?
Not in this.
Not in this
yeah,
contract?
Not in this, it's,
Tonnage, nothing
yeah, nothing.
in this
Yeah.
spot?
Yeah, we're really lucky. We do an awful lot of, you know, helping them out. Let's say somebody's trash gets missed, whatever, but we do, they are good. I gotta tell you, I've had nightmares from other communities. They really are good. They're short-handed, just like everybody else.
Right.
You know, they have their issues, but honestly, we're really lucky to have them. And they appreciate the fact that we don't call them for every little thing. We will send a guy out, try to, you know,
Right.
fix the issues, you know, so,
You can react a lot quicker.
yeah.
So 2025, they and everyone's gonna have the upper hand.
Well, that's what happened with Covanta, was they were pretty much the only game in town, so they had the upper hand, and then we felt it just like a few other communities, so. But there are more haulers than there are, you know, disposal.
management.
Yeah.
Right, yeah.
Yeah.
Not that many.
Not that much,
That's what I thought.
no,
And less and less.
Yeah.
yeah.
because they're growing.
It's a problem, it's a big problem. It's,
Great, thanks, Jane, really appreciate it.
Chief Burns. Page 50, Jackie. Thank you.
Hi, everybody. Thank you. The fire department budget is just up over 3%. And
Page 50.
most of the driver is the salary costs. We're a very young department where people are progressing. A lot of people going through the step system in the salary scale. And also we have several new officers. We've had a lot of retirements over the last couple of years. So we've had both new people coming in and several new promotions. So those folks are going through the step system in addition to the COLA increases. The other thing, we have 3 firefighters right now in the fire academy. They're going to be graduating the second week of April. We're also down 3 positions. We did try to fill those positions. We're at the end of the civil service list, and we couldn't get enough qualified applicants to fill the position. The new list comes out March 15th, and we're going to request a list and hopefully fill those positions. It's really important for us to get people that are going to be good at EMS. Because we're giving medications to people, we have to be very careful that we have good qualified people that are given the right medication to the right patient. So we're very careful with that.
Chief, how generally, and this is probably an anomaly now, but what's typically your open, number of spots that you have on an annual basis? Are you trending a little bit higher right now than?
Yes. The last couple of years, it's been more and more difficult to fill positions. One of the reasons is because we're a paramedic department. We're hiring off a paramedic selective certification list from civil service. So those are people that are already trained as paramedics. And we're seeing other departments that are moving to the advanced life support level. Burlington right now they've just gone to advanced life support, so they probably use that list. But I know in the chiefs that I'm at, probably about a third of the departments are ALS, and they're hiring off that same list. So it's competitive. Also, the private ambulance companies are having trouble hiring paramedics. They're short-staffed. Communities that have private ambulances, when you need a private ambulance, it's hard to get. Some of the nursing homes are having trouble getting for routine transports, trouble getting ambulances. So it's a field where there's a real shortage. And that's new. I mean, we used to have a list of people. We have 3 vacancies. We didn't have maybe 15 people to choose from. Now we have 3 vacancies. We might get 3 people assigned that list. Out of those 3 people, 2 might be willing to put in an application. And so, it's not just other departments are experiencing the same thing.
Thanks.
On the expense side, most of our expenses levels funded. You'll see under professional development, within that major category, there's our mutual aid. We're in a mutual aid group called Metro Fire. It's 35 communities in Great Boston. They've increased their dues. Their dues were flat for over 20 years, and they've increased them from $2,500 to $5,000. Out of that, it's a complete bargain for us at $5,000. We get radio equipment because it encompasses such a wide population of the state. Metro Fire gets grants for radios and things like that, and we reap the benefit of that. Also, it gives us access to a large pool of fire apparatus in the case we have an emergency. And when we had the schoolhouse condo fire, you saw that we brought in equipment from all over the place. that's coordinated through Metro Fire that's run out of Boston Fire Line. So they're bringing in the equipment that we've already designated. So it's a bargain for us. So that's most of that increase there. Other than that, we're looking to staff the department the same as the previous year. Same mission to provide fire, EMS, emergency management mission for the
Good, Joe.
Yeah, if you go back like to the overtime on the previous slide,
Yep.
that seems relatively constant. Is that based on like supply and demand, like what you were saying about, you know, that lag in hiring, like, you know, waiting firefighters come out of the academy, or?
Yep, so the overtime, a number of things go into that, can cause it to spike. Injuries can cause it to spike. We had several injuries this year. COVID caused it to spike. And it's also used to keep our shifts properly staffed for vacations and things like that. So we have to have a minimum number of people on duty at all times in order to staff the trucks. Because if you have a truck with one person on it, there's no capability there. So the overtime fills in when people are on vacation, but what can cause it to spike is openings and injuries, because it has a multiplier effect to it. And we had openings, injuries, and COVID, so it's kind of a big hit this year. Also, too, we were doing things for the community that we didn't normally do. Is we do a lot of vaccines we ran a lot of vaccine clinics. We vaccinated over 1,000 people for the over 65 population. We went to some of the elderly housing complexes, Elderberry Lane, Frank Tanner Drive, and we gave medications right there to the residents, the COVID vaccine. And we also went to people's homes for the shut-ins and vaccinated. So there's a cost to that. Now, the town was able to bill for that. That went to the health department and probably into the general fund. So we never saw any coverage of that.
But going forward though, would you be more cost effective just to hire more if you could, or is it just not that fungible in terms of the different types of resources and levels? And
if we were full staff, we would see a drop to that. But we did hire, we did increase, we got a SAFER grant from the federal government for 3 years that paid 4 firefighters' salaries for 2 years for 75% reimbursement, and then 1 year at 35%. And so we were able to increase our shift strength by 1. But we went through such a phase with people retiring, we lost it. We kind of lost the benefit of seeing it. It would have been a lot worse if we did get that and beef up. And then the vacancies that are hard to fill, that kind of negated any. If we're fully staffed, though, we would definitely see a dip to that.
okay, thank you.
Any other questions for the chief? Good, Carla. Sure.
Can you go, Jackie, can you scroll to that next slide, please? Yeah, keep going.
Page 50, Jackie, sorry.
No, the other way, sorry.
Oops, okay, gotcha.
Keep going, please. Where was it? Oh, there it is, yes, right there's good. Fire inspections, why did they drop off?
On the number of inspections?
Yeah.
Those are the permits that we get. The permits issued. We issued more permits in 2021. Is that what?
Well, there's three, there's fire
Oh, I
inspections,
see.
permits issued,
Okay, I see.
yeah, sorry, so there's a big disparity, big swings there.
Yeah.
from 2019 to 2021?
2020 was COVID, so we
Yeah.
weren't doing as many.
Okay.
And so we're seeing an increase to them. I really can't dig further into that. Generally what that entails is that's smoke detector inspections, that's inspections of oil tanks, propane tanks, and also oil burner installations. So those general things. It's also inspections of these new projects that are coming online. And it all has to be coded too. Now, the ones that we're issuing a permit, you can track really well.
Right.
But when the fire prevention officer was out today, go to a number of places, if you don't come in and enter that in as an inspection, it doesn't get tallied.
Oh.
So even though we're busy doing inspections today, he's not always sitting at the computer feeding the beast,
Right,
you know,
right.
tallying prevention officers. So I can tell you it's gotten busier, but the ones that we're issuing permits for, we don't have any control over the number of homes that are being sold and the number of
Right.
installations.
So you mentioned downtown, so do you, as a department, do you have all the equipment you need for all these new buildings we're gonna have? Do you have enough resources that can support all these not high rises, but, you know, we have a lot more structures in downtown than we did 2 years ago.
We do, and there are different types of buildings. We're just doing it, we had an officers meeting this week, and Fidel was kind enough to come and visit. We actually did an over procedure to kind of enhance how we're gonna respond to these buildings. But to answer your question directly, yes, we're well supported by the town, and things like that. We just changed our hose load that we would carry into those types of buildings to make it more efficient for the firefighters. So we look for those kind of things. They're a very unique building to respond to the size of the construction. Right. So, thank you.
Thanks.
Any questions on the Zoom, Jackie?
No hands at the moment.
Thanks, Jackie. Thanks, Chief. Really appreciate it. Thanks so much.
Chief Clark, page 52, please, Jackie.
Yeah, I bet you I'm lucky number. All right.
You didn't even try to do that, too. Complete luck.
All right, so the police department, so we're broken up into 3 different budgets. I have the police department, I have dispatch, and we have coalition now that falls under us. So the overall police department budget, we're looking at 3.1% from last year. I'm not asking for any significant changes by any means of staffing levels. The only thing I'm asking for is, we were very lucky in the past, our park enforcement officer was budgeted for 22 hours and our animal control officer was the same person for 11 hours. And we got a 40-hour position basically out of the person because if they weren't dealing with animal calls, they were dealing with downtown parking. If they couldn't deal with that, they were dealing with animal calls. We have since regionalized the animal control officer. It's worked out great. So I'm looking to increase from 22 hours to 32 for the parking enforcement officer. We did interview somebody, we have a job offer out to them, we have somebody starting in April, and he has agreed that if we do go up, he'll gladly go up to 32 hours. But I think the key to downtown parking, whatever the park committee comes up with, I think anybody's watched the meetings, you've heard them say time and time again, enforcement's the key, enforcement's the key. We've been filling it with police officers doing it. The problem is if it's a 4-hour parking zone and a police officer drives by, writes down all the plates, and then they get sent to a domestic or car crash, they don't make it back there. So it's another officer trying to come in, figure out what was there and not there. So having a dedicated park enforcement officer is going to be key. And we're asking for that to jump up to 32 hours, and he's agreed to jump like kind of mixed days of the week up a little bit to kind of keep people off. Again, we're not looking to hammer people, that's not what it's about. But if you don't enforce it, it's never gonna, it's never, whatever park comes up with is not gonna work unless there's some straight enforcement out there.
If we can just get a little heads up as far as what that schedule is, that would be fine. Other than that, I think, exactly. I mean, hey, you know, we are gonna approve it, so I just.
Color coded.
Yeah, and so that's the only increase I'm looking for staffing. I'm gonna say something I'm gonna regret as soon as I walk out the parking lot. But first, for police officers, we're budgeted for 46 sworn officers and 2.5 civilian staff. Right now, fingers crossed, until I walk out the front door, we are fully staffed for the first time in 28 years. Fully staffed doesn't mean I have actually bodies here though. We have one person in the academy. Remember, our police academy is 6 months long. When we hire somebody, they legally cannot work in the job until they graduate the police academy and become a sworn police officer. Then they do 14 weeks of field training with us. So this person graduated in July. I won't see them until September. We hired them in January. But it's been filled.
Yep.
I have 2 female officers. One is out on maternity leave, and I have another one that's she is told us she's pregnant. So we have a policy that as soon as the doctor tells us they don't want her wearing the gun belt or the bulletproof vest anymore, we pull her off the road, and she does administrative tasks for us, which is great. She still works for us, she's still in there, but she's not on the road. So it's affecting my staffing on the road, but I do have her doing very important administrative tasks for us. And one of my other female officers is out on maternity leave. She's due to return back at the beginning of May. I did have an officer that got activated by the National Guard for 2 weeks that lasted 2 years. I finally got him back to lose somebody else to the Air Force getting called up.
Okay.
So when I say we're at full staffing, that doesn't mean I actually have all the physical bodies in, but hey, I'll take it. I'm in a better position to fight right here now, so I'll take it. So for police-wise, we're good. So like I said, the only significant thing I was looking for was that. As far as any big expenses for salary, most of the salary, we're a very young department like the fire department. We've seen massive retirements across policing. I've been chief officially for 2 years now, and I'm actually one of the most senior chiefs in Massachusetts because people are leaving this job left and right. And we've seen massive retirements in the police world, so we have a very young department. We've been very fortunate though, we're a very desirable town to work for. We've recently been able to hire lateral transfers. We have a police officer from Arlington, Nantucket, Nahant, Portsmouth, New Hampshire, Exeter, New Hampshire, an officer from Connecticut, 2 from college campus police departments that have come in here. We're a very desirable place. We've actually lucked out with some, we didn't have to send them to the academy. They came to us fully academy trained. So that's been a huge saver for us. We've been very lucky there, but we are going up there. So the biggest thing I'm looking for is in training. I'm asking for more with posts, with police reform. We've really been on top of training, and we're trying to send the police officers as much training as we can. Some of it's requirements that they, all of a sudden, it's not funded. Like we get a thing like, hey, all officers have to go through this. And sometimes we have to pull officers off a shift to send them and either pay them overtime or backfill for overtime, so that's been it. But I've been really focused on keeping up with anything with de-escalation training, cultural sensitivity training. We've really been on top of this. We've been at the forefront anyway. Because we're an accredited agency, our actually policy procedures, 97% of them already met the post-police reform stuff anyway, because we're an accredited agency, we're already well ahead. So we're actually ahead of a lot more agencies. So that's something that we continue to work on, and any type of training I can get, especially with the de-escalation and calm the situation down, that's what we've been working on. So that's probably the biggest increase you've seen. And then the parking enforcement is 25% up, but going from 22 hours to 32, it sounds like a big number, but it's really not. As far as expenses, I'm asking for a slight increase in cruises for July 1. The cost of cruises is going up, but we're also, the technology we think is finally caught up, and we're going to be purchasing a hybrid cruiser on July 1 to see how it goes. We've talked to a lot of agencies that have driven them. The biggest problem with a lot of those cars is we drive our cars 24/7. Day shift gets off, evening shift jumps in it, evening shift goes out, midnight day shift jumps into it, and vice versa. So a lot of the agencies around us have purchased the hybrids and like them, so we're going to purchase one in July 1. It costs us more for the hybrid initially, but we're going to look to test drive it. And the DPW, Jay, and not knocking your guys, your mechanics are fantastic, but a lot of them aren't trained to work on a hybrid system. So we buy a lot of towns have bought a slight warranty with it just to cover the hybrid portion of it. DPW can still do all the maintenance on it, the brakes, everything else, but if anything goes wrong with the hybrid system, the warranty will cover us with Ford, and Ford will take care of it. If that's the case, and the hybrid works out well for us, and it's keeping up, then that's where I'll probably be transitioning the fleet into as we go along. But that's why I'm asking for a slight increase in the cost of cruises, just because the cruiser itself is about $3,000 to $4,000 more per car. And that's why I'd like to try it out. Other than that, miscellaneous is the next big expense. It's technology, tracking systems, tracking tickets, tracking different things, what kind of technology upgrades. Any software that we have, any programs we have all seen an increase in renewing their contract with them, so that's been the biggest expenses there so far. We've been, just with the fire departments, and I'll just say IT and facilities have been the unsung heroes during the pandemic. We've been out there, we never stopped. We're out there 24/7. The types of crimes we're seeing, were different. We saw a significant amount of unemployment fraud and ID theft. We saw lower cases of accidents. Now that the world's kind of opened back up again, we're seeing those drop. Accidents shot right up, arrests are going right back up. So we kind of are back to the normal type of police work for us. We never slowed down, it just kind of shifted. But things remain the same for us. We're now able to get back out in the community more. We do have rad classes coming up. Our Facebook is following. I hope everybody saw that we got the 2 comfort dogs. We have.
I was hoping to see them here.
They're not here yet. Brian's will be in 3 weeks. Matt Fatches is about 2 weeks old. His is a golden lab. Brian's a black lab. They'll be joining us, and I want to thank Bob and Fidel for really backing that program with us, and the new superintendent. The school committee signed on with it, and everything's great. So they will actually be in the schools, but they'll be available to the whole community. But we have them coming up, but those are donated. It didn't cost us anything, and we've had a lot of donations already pour in to cover the cost. The vet has agreed, the vet in downtown Reading, that's Animal Hospital, next to CVS, she's agreed to take on services for us. So it's a great thing to have. It's actually minimal cost to us.
So nice. It's great.
So like I said, police work, we're still busy out there, just we kind of had a shift in what we were doing, but we're still out there, very active, still trying to reach out to the public. We did our first RAD class, the first is a police academy class, we have another RAD class coming up, and we're back out there. We'll have the open house in the spring, and we're gonna kind of get back out there, and you'll see us back out in the community very busy. So, does anybody have any specific questions about the police side of things before I go into the coalition, the mental health clinician, and dispatch?
Go, Joe.
Yeah, I don't want to jinx us, and I'm not even sure if this is your responsibility, but when it comes to ransomware, cyber security, all that good stuff, right?
Yep.
How much of that is like the police department versus the town technology and that infrastructure?
If it was something on us, like it hit us, something, our IT department would be all over it, no doubt in my mind. But if it's a citizen that happens, there's actually regional groups we're part of, just like NEMLEC with the SWAT team and the canines. There's regional agencies out there that we join up with, or the federal task force will join up with cybercrime for identity theft and everything, and we work hand in hand with those. Our detectives sit on monthly meetings with those groups, they compare stuff, so it's better to regionalize because it gives us a lot more assets.
Okay.
But we're nowhere we behind because we're regionalized. It actually is a benefit to us.
Okay.
Especially if stuff goes state lines or international, being part of a federal task force makes it a lot easier for us to kind of have them involved.
But technology infrastructure, like our networks in general, like on the town side, are they?
I gotta tell you, we are very fortunate to have the IT department we have. They're right on top of things, they're rock solid, they play tests on us a lot to make sure we're doing what we're supposed to be doing, so they're right on top of things. Yeah, we're very fortunate to have what we have in there for technology.
Good.
Because I've heard that from other agencies, we are very fortunate.
Great. Thanks.
Andrew has a question.
Go ahead, Andrew.
I was gonna get away with it, sorry. Go ahead, Andrew.
Thank you. So I just have a question, clarification as far as the decreases, which is not a normal question, right? So, as far as it goes for cell monitors and fitness, as well as supplying equipment, what are the drivers to the decreases in that?
Okay, so as far as cell monitors, we had stopped the cell monitor program a while ago because we couldn't get people to come in. And with Sheriff Katujian, they started a regional lockup program. So if we are having somebody that's not bailable, or because the warrant will let them be bailed, or the bail is so high, like we just arrested a guy the other night that the feds were looking for, and his bail was $10,000. Instead of us having them sit in our cell for the entire weekend, and us hiring overtime or someone to watch them, there's an annual regional lockup that the Sheriff's Department got a grant for, and we can call them up. They'll accept the detainee, and we drive them to Billerica. They house them, then we go pick them up on Monday morning and bring them over to court. And that's a huge, not just a cost savings to town, liability-wise, that's what the sheriffs are trained to do. They're trained to get people their medication. They have hospital staff on there. They're trained to feed them more so than we ever are. So that's why I don't need the cost of the cell monitors anymore because of that program. If that makes sense.
How long did that grant, I don't need to get into specifics, do you know how long that grant was for?
It's a significant period of time, something that, I guess there's an agreement that if it goes well and the POW program goes well, it's actually going to get incorporated into his budget.
Now, is the fitness decrease a one-off?
That was something that was in the contract that to gain something else in the contract, the unions gave up. So that's why that cost of that came out.
And then supplies and equipment, that's just based upon what you used in 2022, you project a reduction in 2023?
Yeah, so that was outfitting a lot of officers for the academy, the initial gear, because we're up to, like I said, hopefully at last full staffing. I'm not gonna need as much for equipment to outfit new officers.
Okay, thank you.
So,
His hand raised.
Sorry, who was it?
Is Chris Haley?
Oh, go ahead, Chris.
Thanks, Jackie. Yeah, I just want to reiterate the whole parking enforcement officer. It's going to be pivotal for downtown and whatnot for everything that parking is. The committee is working on to have it be enforced because the majority of everything that we're trying to implement hinges on actual enforcement. So yeah, I just want to reiterate that that's definitely a critical part of this entire budget and everything going forward. So thank you.
good to move on to the coalition part? Everyone?
Go for it.
So the
Page
coalition.
55, Jackie. Thank you.
So the coalition budget, I'm asking for a 1.7 increase. That's just due for pay increases. So we've interviewed and have selected a person for the mental health clinician position. And that person has accepted the job. We're just going through some background, basic stuff we have to do for HR and everything first, references, a little bit of background check. And that person is expected to start in April, and we'll announce it then, but we're likely to have that person on board with the staffing. We're thrilled, actually. The candidate we have, we think is going to be a great fit for this town, and it's going to be fill a severe need that we need in public safety. So it's going to be a great fit for us. So, but that's the only increase we're asking for. Sorry, not the increase, that was already budgeted in. And so I just want to double check on expenses. Yeah, expenses are pretty much level funded. We've level funded everything for expenses. You guys, everybody is very generous. Last time with the coalition, updating a lot of significant software packages that they needed, and Erica said that she's in a great position and she doesn't need any more increase. Everything works out great, so we've level funded that part of it.
Sorry, Chief.
Go ahead, Jerry.
You just said 1.7%, but I see 2% on the slide here.
You might have an older version. We found a few typos,
Okay.
so
I mean,
this is right.
In the print thing, I see 1.7.
Yeah.
Okay.
John, I apologize, that might have been an older thing we revised a little bit of a while.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's on me. That's on me.
Oh, I see. So it's.
That's 2 years, blame on Bob's at least 2 years.
Exactly.
Everybody good for me to move on to
2% of the total.
Yeah.
Okay.
1.7% of the total.
Yeah.
It's on.
So the dispatch, we're going up 2.9. Again, it's a very young dispatch center. Part of it is myself. We actually hired one of my female dispatchers we hired as a police officer. Great pickup for the police side, but a huge loss on the dispatch side. So there's been some turnover in there. We did go to a new schedule for them that has worked out fantastic, giving us overlap in busier times. And so it's for salaries, people on steps there, we just have a very, a lot newer dispatchers in there. So looking for 2.9%, most of it being with salary. And the biggest increase is for them for expenses is technology. Again, anything we can do to upgrade the technology in there, they've become vital to getting the information out. The dispatch, that job is a very important job. They can get the information we need, so when the fire chief or the captain is setting to a call, they know exactly what they're walking into. Same thing with us, and the training out there for them to dive more into the call, see what it is, and also they're getting called to court more than they've ever been in their lives, because they can set probable cause for us for certain cases based on the information they get. So we're actually sending them for the first time ever for courtroom testimony and training, and just any new technology upgrades out there. The new dispatch center facilities did a fantastic job of getting that up and running for us. That's up and running. It's been a huge asset to us, but that's been the biggest thing. We just want to keep up the training with them and some technology, equipment that's available. With new cell phone changes, be able to ping a cell phone if we have a missing person. We can actually ping a cell phone to a very small area, and every 15 seconds track if it's moving. So little things like that. Again, it's not something we just randomly give people. We need to fill out a form, sign it off, send it to T-Mobile, whoever, to get authorization. But it's a great technology tool, so we're looking to kind of upgrade those technologies. So that's the only real expense that we're looking for, and that was the technology part of things.
Question on the E911 grant
Yeah.
support. Can you please explain kind of the trend? Or is that just kind of a predetermined number based on the terms of the grant?
So it's a rough number that we've pretty much consistently got. I know it used to be 55,000, and then we got one year we got 57,000, one year we got 49. It's kind of, there's no real set trend. So 50,000 is basically the based on the way it's trended up. Though the past couple years it's been right around 60. So it's no guarantee we're going to get it, but every year so far we have, and it has been trending upwards based on, again, some technology upgrades we've made. Because of those technology upgrades and us being able to ping cell phones and different things, they've increased our funding to help out with some of that. The technology we can use for somebody if they are hearing impaired or listening impaired, the technology we have for that, the training we have that, because we have that, then they upgrade the grant backfill for us. So it's a rough idea for it. We're making 63 this year, we're making 59, but it's like a placeholder. Again, there's no guarantee, but we've got it every single year.
Any other questions for the chief? Jackie, any hands up on the Zoom?
No hands.
Great.
So we'll go to Matt now. Matt, you're on Zoom?
Yep.
Thank
Okay,
you.
can everybody, can you hear me okay?
We can hear you fine. Just see if you can go at the same pace as the chief, that would be great.
Page 27.
I don't think that's physically possible.
Page 27. Thank you.
I don't want to waste everybody's time.
That's right.
Thank you, everybody. So I'll be brief. I'll pretty much just open it up to questions, but I want to say that my budget is increasing 6.9%. That's the ask. It's largely driven by a few factors. One of them, I mention this every year, is elections come under my budget. Some years we have one election and the budget's very low. Next year there's going to be 3 elections, so the budget is a lot higher than it was last year based on those 3 elections. Also, we're funding a compensation study for non-union employees. The results of that study is in the HR budget, and that will be $85,000 there. And also there is a few smaller lines, $15,000 to the select board, and also some IT line items where we're going to purchase, we are going to be able to purchase some Office 365 licenses for people. We won't have the full town on yet, but we're doing it sort of incrementally. So that's really the nuts and bolts of it. I have 5 divisions within administrative services. I'm happy to answer questions on any one of those divisions. I'm not asking for any new employees. My FTEs are remaining at 17.5 again this year, so there won't be any new hires. So with that, I can just turn it over to questions that you might have.
Any questions for Matt? So Matt, just a question on the compensation study. When did that kick off, and when does it look for completion? Or when's it set to kick off? Sorry.
It's happening. We had to go through a procurement process, so we are going through that right now. We're almost ready to announce the results of the procurement. So we have a vendor, an outside vendor, that's going to conduct that study for us. And I think it's going to happen immediately. We're hoping to make some funding recommendations, I believe, at November town meeting. So the results would be in time for November town meeting, and we would then, hopefully reallocate some funds based on that in November.
Mark's raised.
Good, Mark.
Thanks, Ed. Thanks, Matt. Are you about to walk us through the technology budget as one of the areas, or if not, could I ask you to kind of talk about the increase there, please?
Sure, yeah. So the technology budget is definitely.
Page 30, Jackie, sorry, page 30.
Right. Part of the administrative services budget. So just a few highlights for the increases there. A little bit of an increase in the technology overtime. We had to delay some projects because of COVID. So now those projects are getting underway, so there'll be a little bit of overtime in that. Another increase, if you look under professional services, we have a fiber maintenance agreement that we're going to be funding this year, and that's why that line is up 26.3%. And as I mentioned earlier, the technology department is purchasing Office 365 licenses. The way I think we're going to do it is because we can't, even with this increase, we can't afford to do the whole town. I think we're going to be able to provide the email service for the whole town at Office 365. And then a few licenses, most department heads have them already, so we'll go down to maybe assistant department heads, get them on board and cycle them in. So hopefully maybe in the next year's budget, 2024 budget, we'll be able to fully fund the entire suite of people. But that's really the only real major changes in the technology budget, unless you have any specific questions on line items. Okay, looks like Mark's good on that. And so I'm happy to answer questions on any of the other budgets, but I pretty much gave you the highlights of the increases, which is generally what people are interested in. So.
Matt, quick question. I'm not sure if this falls under you or where it might fall, but the changes to the website, the town website, does that fall under your department?
Yes. Yep, it does, and that's we're very close to completing that. We're going to be previewing it at a select board meeting coming up later in March, and hopefully launching the new site at the end of March. So it's been quite a project, though. We have the outside company helping us quite a bit, but we also have a team of 10 people inside our organization that have been working on it pretty much constantly to get everything migrated over, to get it looking the way we want it to look. And I think everybody's going to be pleased with it. There's going to be a lot of improvements over the current site. I won't tell you everything right now, but I think everybody will really like it.
So Matt, is there much in this budget or that's attributed to the work on the website? Is there kind of a specific line item or anything?
Yeah, that was done through last year's budget. Through actually this current fiscal year that we're in, we funded it that way, so nothing in the 2023 budget that we need to worry about.
Gotcha. Good, Joe.
Yeah, I guess it's good too, but the GIS administrator, why would that be going down? Is that shifting hours?
Yeah, that's because we had a long-term GIS administrator that recently retired, and we hired a really great replacement for her. But when we hire somebody at a lesser rate, because we have a step system. So he starts at a lower step than she did, and that's why that's going on.
Got it. Okay, thanks.
Yeah.
Great, thanks, Matt. Appreciate it.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thanks, Matt. Jean, please, page 34, Jackie.
Thank you, everybody. So I'm going to talk about some broad ideas first, and then I'll go into the budget. The public service budget is increased by 2.3%. So it's basically a level funded budget, and it's similar to last year in terms of that level of increase. But the couple of points I want to make before I get started, I want to really say a big thank you to all the staff in town, but especially the public services staff who have gone above and beyond. And we do some very different things in our department. We're always doing new things. There's been a couple of new ad hoc committees, the park committee, the recalc committee, and staff has just jumped in and enthusiastically embraced the new ideas, the new workload, the added night meetings. We have about a dozen boards in public services, and along with that goes multiple night meetings. I'm tonight on a back-to-back, two back-to-back night meetings. So, and it's not unusual. And so I want to say a big thank you, and I'll leave it there. I also want to talk a little bit about how we're able to stay and keep our budget at these low increases. The first thing that we do, and I know a couple other people mentioned it tonight, is we take advantage of regionalization. So several years ago, we started a program called the Metro North Regional Housing Services Office. And that's a consortium of communities that we got together and we formed and we put the model together for staffing. And this Regional Housing Services Office allows us to have the expertise available to the group, but through a shared arrangement. And this is an important aspect of affordable housing because this gives us the ability to preserve the affordable housing that we have and not lose units, and to follow up on all of the detailed monitoring agreements and other requirements that go along with affordable housing. So it's an important program, and it's one that I'm very proud of. We have staffed it in Reading, and with our member communities have really grown the program. And as such, in FY23, this budget moves to a consultant-based model instead of an in-house model. And that is because we are growing this program and we need a different model to serve us better. So this gives us, again, that expertise, but spread across the region. The second thing that we do a lot of is we work with our community partners, and we have a lot of them. Similar to regionalization, by partnering with our nonprofits and others, we can do more by spending less. An example of this is in July of 2021, when the 625 Main Street 39-unit apartment building was basically decommissioned and declared uninhabitable due to a flood. We assembled a task force of people from the state, Salvation Army, Public Safety, Metro Boston Housing, which is a nonprofit out of Boston. And by enlisting these community partners, we were able to find permanent housing for several families and fund, with the help of the Salvation Army, over $100,000 in rent for temporary housing, as well as other resources in this dire situation. The town of Reading is not queued up to respond to these things. And the only way that we could assist this tremendous need was by working collaboratively with our community partners. And I think that was a big win for the town. Grants is another thing we all talk about, and we all chase them, and we all work really hard to figure out how can we leverage as much grant money as possible. We spend a lot of time planning for grants because of most of the grants we get involved in, we have to do a lot of advanced work to qualify. The administration of the grants, the reports, the contracts, that's something we get involved in. And we work collaboratively with the volunteers. The Community Garden Project is one example this year. So I wanted to point out on page 41 that several $100,000 have been secured over the past year, and beyond that for economic development. The last category I want to talk about, and then if you could just jump back, Jackie, sorry to keep jumping around. But the last category I want to highlight is other revenues. Incentive payments, fees, that kind of thing. So our inspections department brings in just under $1 million a year. We don't ever see that money because it goes into the general fund. But that's the amount of volume that we're doing in inspections. And I want to say a big shout out to the team that runs that, because they run it well, they use technology, and it's an extremely efficient program. So that's just one example of a revenue stream that we are responsible for. I also want to highlight that our recreation division turns back a significant amount of money every year that they generate through programs. And veterans, the expenses are reimbursed by the state to the tune of 75%. So when you add all of that up, our $1.6 million budget, plus or minus, 1.637650 to be specific, I think that we more than cover that with all of these efforts. So that being said, just to talk specifics on the budget, at 2.3%, it really works out to pretty much a level funded budget. I've sort of categorized what we do. The administrative side is myself and support staff. We're mostly salaries, like most of the other budgets. The two assistant department heads are in their respective areas in public services, which are community services and community development. And in community services, we have 3 divisions. We have Elder Human Services, the Pleasant Street Center, we have Recreation, and we have Veterans. In the community development area, we have Planning and Economic Development, Inspections, Conservation, and Historic. And as Jane Kinsella noted with a couple of her boards, similarly, the Historical Commission now has moved over to the Select Board. So we had a small budget, usually about $1,500, that now is out of this budget and into that line item for the Select Board to consider as part of a pool. So the key areas that I want to highlight as far as what's changed, in the administration area, we have a slight increase to $5,850, and $5,000 of that was in expenses, $850 was in salaries, and that has to do with a small increase on the $5,000 of outsourced professional services, and a very small salary increase, mostly related to what was left over after the cost of living from the support that was budgeted at $7,500. Community services expenses are the same, and the salary budget is increased, $26,375 or 4.3%, and that increase is to expand on hours, mostly for part-time staff, mostly in response to demands for services in Elder Human Services, and a little bit to add a few hours for rec. And then community development expenses are increased, but the salary is decreased, and this has to do with the shift from the in-house staffing to the consultant model, and that's a net increase of $4,625 or 0.7%. That's basically what I wanted to highlight in the budget, and I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Any questions from folks in the room? So Gene, I had a quick one, and I think it's manifested on, so Jackie, I think it's page 39. I think this is what you were referring to is when you move to the consultative model, is that something's moving from a salary to an expense?
Mm-hmm.
Is that pretty much it? So like if you're looking at, the Regional Affordable Housing Coordinator at FY22 at $58,650, that's off. That goes to 0 in FY23, but it moves from 12,500 to 75,000 under expenses at the bottom of the page, right?
Correct. Yeah, the consultant contract under Regional Affordable Housing at the bottom is estimated at 75,000. And we have a small budget for economic development expenses, and then it's the offset of the 35,000 that takes you to a $60,000 net.
Yep, and that's the same thing for the planning and economic development too. That same relationship exists in the top on salaries, and then down below in expenses, right?
Yep.
Great. Any other questions? Anybody on the Zoom, Jackie?
Jean Morosky.
Go ahead, Jean.
Hi, thanks. Can you hear me okay?
Yep, perfect.
Great. Jean, this is a really tiny number, so I'm loath to even ask the question, but I'm curious why the Historic Commission expenses were moved away from
public services and into the select board. Could you talk a little bit about that change?
Sure. So the, I think Jane Kinsella mentioned the same thing with the town forest and the trails committee. All of these small budgets were taken out of the departments and consolidated into the select board. And that was a decision that was made to, basically, I think, streamline it, where we were seeing, you know, some of the requests go directly to the select board anyway. I think the thinking was, well, maybe just put it all in a bundle and let the select board make some decisions about how they want to fund things. We still work very closely with the Historical Commission and the Historic District Commission. Julie and I in particular are heavily involved in both of those boards. There's a lot going on, and so we work very, very closely with the volunteers. The $1,500 budget, I guess they'll have to decide how that goes.
Got you. Thank you very much.
Yep.
Thanks, Gene, appreciate it.
Thank you, everybody.
Sharon, could we have you do finance on page 43? You're still there?
Yeah.
Thank you.
So, it's, just give it, there we go. Can you scroll down a little bit? So, thank you. Perfect. So, not a lot going on here in finance, but I figured I would give you the highlights. 3.9% is what the finance budget is going up. All of our staff is non-union staff, so they're getting a step and a COLA. And the changes that you see within the wages is up 4.2%. And so there's a couple little changes outside of just a step and a COLA. In the accounting division, we had an admin that took on some more responsibilities and got up to the next level, so that changed a little bit of her pay. And then also in finance, we have a collector in the clerk's office. We added 2.5 hours a week to her schedule, and that accounts for the 4.1%. If we scroll down a little bit further so we can see the finance expenses. Thank you. So the finance expenses are up 2.2%. The big change there is in assessing. Assessing has our regional assessor. His contract's up 2% over the prior year. But also we are in a reval cycle. Every 5 years we do a reval, and he asked for extra funding of an additional $2,500 above what we normally have for personal property inspections. He also asked for some additional funding to build or to upgrade our CAMA bridge. So CAMA is the software the assessor uses, the Patriot software that he uses, and it communicates with Munis to save us time. But there's a piece of it that doesn't get picked up, and that's the exemptions he does every year. So he wanted to make some modifications to include that for time savings and all of that. So he had asked for stuff that he hadn't asked him for in the past. So what we did was we, and they seem like one-time items, we shifted money from finance and accounting in there so that we could still stay at that 3.9% increase about what Bob had, told us to stay at that 3.85% if you can. Obviously, sometimes you have some needs, and he had some needs that are kind of one-time items. So I shifted some expenses. So for instance, in finance, our treasurer just had a baby, and he says, I'm not going to the August conference. So I knew that there was going to be savings in the professional development for finance. So I knew that it wouldn't be a problem to move those funds up to assessing. And then I don't usually spend all of my professional development, so I brought some of the money from my department down so to try and cover this additional expense for the 1 year. And that's really all that's going on, honestly, not much. If anybody has any questions.
None appearing in the room. Jackie, anybody with a hand up on Zoom?
No hands on Zoom.
Perfect bookend. Start with Sharon, then with Sharon. I like it.
Okay. There is one more that we didn't cover, but it's very short. Page 48. public health. So I can run through that 2 seconds.
Oh, okay. Yep.
Page 48. Essentially, the only change in page 48 is that we're adding additional support for Ade. He just hired an inspector that is doing well, and I mean, and with everything going on with the pandemic, that additional support is going to be critical.
So, I recall a request from the health director for some chunk of money to digitize records. Where did that go?
So that was $30,000 that he requested. We are hoping to go to April town meeting actually as a change to this budget. So yeah, exactly. For FY22, it's $30,000. I mean, I think it's not going to break the bank. We're just going to ask for it, and he's ready to roll to implement.
Okay.
Any other questions on health? Oh, just the difference on from 22 budget for the director. Is that just what was budgeted versus?
Exactly right. Yes. So the it was budgeted with the expectation of hiring someone at 140, and we were lucky to find Ade, who's doing great, and this is his actual salary is on the budget for FY23.
Yep. Perfect. Any hands up on the Zoom, Jackie?
No.
You sure? No, just good. Sounds good. Thank you. Perfect.
Just a quick question, Ed.
Yeah, sure.
Is the inspector hired in?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. She started right about when I started. So the about 3 weeks in, and at this point, so she's doing a lot of training, but she's sharp. I mean, she's has a lot of experience. She's focusing on setting up systems at this point, right? We spent a lot of time on the software, right? Like what the inspections reports are going to look like. But she's on board.
Came from out of town?
Yes. Yeah.
All right.
I'm very hopeful. That is the entire budget.
That is the entire budget.
That is the entire budget. So
We ripped that.
Yeah.
We ripped through that.
Good job.
So with that, Ann or Mark, did you want to adjourn select board?
I will make a motion, actually. Can I ask one of the fellow board members to make a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
Is
Second.
there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Carlo. So we'll vote then. As I see you, we're done. Carlo?
Yes.
Chris?
Yes.
Mark? Yes, I believe that's it. I don't see, we're adjourned. Thank you.
Thanks. Cool. All right, so we can go to our last agenda item. And by the way, thanks everyone for coming in. I really
awesome.
appreciate it.
Appreciate
Thank you for doing all of this. You really, really appreciate it.
Thanks, Gene. Thanks, Matt. Thanks, Sharon.
Yeah, thanks everybody on from the town online. Really appreciate it. FinCom just has one last agenda item for minutes. Thanks very much. Really
Have a good night, everybody.
See ya. All right, now we got rid of all of them. So now we're slimmer. So do we have any questions on the minutes? If not, I'll take a motion.
Move to approve the minutes of March 2nd, 2022.
Second.
Jackie Beecham. Jackie Beecham, Mark. Sorry about that. She's quiet, but she's quick. All right, so we'll go to a vote. We'll start. Andrew? Jean?
Yes.
Joe?
Yes.
Marianne?
Yes?
Eric?
Yes.
Jackie?
Yes.
Jeffrey?
Yes.
Mark?
Yes.
Ed, yes. 9-0.
So, before we
Perfect.
adjourn, I just want
No, yeah, we're not, yeah,
Okay.
so, yeah, we won't adjourn, but I think I knew your question. What are we gonna do next week?
Yeah, I see town meeting warrant articles are on there still, right? But
Yeah, so I guess that's the question for us to debate, as far as, for next Tuesday. We can basically, again, I think it's probably worth it to keep the meeting and then start to go through the warrant articles.
Sure.
But if do you think will we be ready for that?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Yeah, as long as, we're fine to be able to do that. But open,
so the select board has approved them already or
Yes.
closed the warrant?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. The select board closed the warrant on March 1st.
Okay.
So it's all set. I mean, yeah, so we're ready. I mean, I would suggest that if you're still looking for an RMLD update, we call them and ask them to come on the 15th, and hopefully we also have a vote on the 15th, and therefore a meeting is not needed on the 23rd. But that's totally up to you.
yeah, I mean, again, I'm happy with either of those. If we needed to split them, if RMLD can only come on the 23rd, that's fine too.
They'll be here on the 15th.
Yeah.
Make sure that.
Yeah, either way, I mean, I'm happy in either way. And then if it does, then maybe it might free up a date for you, Mary Ann.
Yeah, so you're saying that we may not have the meeting on the 15th and wait, it depends on our
No, flipped.
RMLD?
Flipped. We'll have the meeting on the 15th to discuss and vote on the articles. And then the other agenda item, if RMLD can come to the 15th, then we won't need the 23rd.
Right, but then that would add another possible, like, ARPA meeting
Yep,
too.
that's
I
what-
just
yeah.
would wanna-
Yep, so that, yeah.
That's
so-
good to know,
Yep,
because then,
That
if
was
we
the
had the
thought process.
29th, that would squeeze one more in. One more that we can argue about the scope.
I'm not going there.
No, we don't have as an agenda item on here, but Jeannie and I had discussed, I don't know when we want to start it, like, tell Jackie these are things to put on the website. But should we not worry about it until the new website rolls out? Like, it's not on the agenda, but I'm just thinking, just wait till the new website rolls out to start adding those things. Remember we were gonna
That's
have
probably be best, and it will actually launch on the 23rd. It's gonna launch on the 23rd.
March 23rd?
Yes.
That's good, because I really like those colored pie charts in the budget. I think those would be great to have there when people, let's see, where does the money go? All right, so we'll start adding that agenda item then, I guess.
so if we're looking at like what we had for the agenda items for the 23rd, the other one was that might be the same thing as you were just mentioning, Mary Ann, the FinCom email procedure, but it may be the same thing as far as the town, what we put on the website as well.
Yeah, I think it's just at the end of our meeting, we say, okay, make sure we have this, the packet on the website and
Yeah, but if we don't,
if we have any materials.
we may just then hold off on that line item if we don't meet on the 23rd, since the website's not going to be launched till then anyways. We can just do that on the next one, so.
Yeah, it doesn't have to be immediate, because there'll probably be some kinks with the website
Yep.
anyway. So,
Any questions or thoughts on that, that proposal to be able to collapse things into next Tuesday?
I think the email discussion was delayed to the 23rd because the select board was supposed to have a discussion on the 22nd.
There you go. That's it. Perfect. Yeah, so there's no need to move that up, and then we'll just, if we don't meet on the 23rd, then we'll decide that, we'll discuss that at our next meeting after the 22nd.
Yeah, and we've had a lot of internal conversations about it. The new website is going to have a lot more functionality, and it's going to be easier to manage. Like so I think that once we address the the other boards, I think it's gonna be easier for FinCom.
Yep.
So is there any way that, you probably can't highlight that at town meeting, but like just have that in the background at the beginning or something, or
Sure,
remind people,
Yeah.
like, working into a report, I don't know, so.
That's great,
so-
for sure.
Actually, that's
Do that.
one of the things the notes I took today were a lot of the things that I wanted to be able to highlight in the FinCom report. So that, and actually that's one of the ones I had, yeah. So in one of them, or maybe multiple of them, I'll mention those kind of highlights, so.
Yep. Fidel, last time you mentioned the Your Arlington Dollar YouTube. So I took a look at it, and it's a really, you're right, it's a really neat example of how you can explain budgets in different ways, and people understand it in different ways. And for people like me who, you know, like sort of narratives and that discussion, that's helpful. So hopefully the website is something that can accommodate those kinds of, whether it's the YouTube series or, you know, some communication streams that are a little newer.
Absolutely. And Sharon's still on, but Sharon and I are going to do a couple of YouTubes on the budget ahead of town meeting. So it's, she's going to do it essentially the revenue and forecast and share costs on a YouTube, and I'll do you know, just a high level overview of the budget as well, just as a to do more engagement and in a new medium.
Yeah.
That's good stuff. Great. All right. Well, then with that, I'll entertain a motion.
Move to adjourn.
Thank you, Jeffrey. Second?
Second.
Thanks, Joe. Start with Andrew.
Yes.
Jean?
Yes.
Joe?
Yes.
Mary Ann?
Yes.
Eric?
Yes.
Jackie?
Yes.
Jeffrey?
Yes.
Mark?
Yes.
Ed, yes. We're adjourned.
Gotta use your gavel.
Oh, yeah.